When you look at a complete fantasy map, it should inspire wonder. What's in that forest? What's under those mountains? Who lives in that town or that old ruin nearby? But you do not need to be a professional cartographer or even have much skill with drawing to make a fantasy map that instills a sense of wonder. And I'm going to show you how. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together, and this video isn't necessarily about role-playing games, but if you like that sort of thing, be sure to subscribe. First, gather your tools. A pencil and a few pieces of paper will do the trick. Sure, you can buy more professional pencils and special erasers and stuff, and later you may want some decent pens or markers to ink it up, but we don't need to worry about any of that yet. The most important part of any creative endeavor is to just get started. So put that pencil to paper and start listing out some of the cool things you may want to draw on your map. Yeah, we don't want to actually begin drawing immediately. We're about to, but it helps to know what to draw first, so we can practice or warm up. And call me old-fashioned, but I do believe every fantasy map worth its parchment needs a mountain range with a volcano, a river and a coastline, at least one castle and some villages, a dense forest, a cave, and some old ruins like a watchtower. All that provides a healthy habitat for the most iconic fantasy peoples and creatures. Now, speaking of icons, we begin drawing by practicing these icons. There are many ways to draw each of them, some way more complex and detailed than the others, but this video is going to focus on the simple versions that anyone can draw without needing much practice by breaking them into their fundamentals. Straight lines, curved lines, angled lines. Whoa, slow down. That's just two straight lines together. And don't even get me started on dots and cross-hatching. It's all easy stuff that you can totally handle. But this is a good time to get some artistic inspiration from professional fantasy maps like those from today's sponsor, Chepeku. The Chepeku Patreon is a library of over 4,000 RPG maps that you can access for only $5, and they have classics like The Blacksmith and The Thieves Guild, but they also have train stations, remote observatories, eldritch elderbrain lairs, infernal contract offices, hanging gardens, royal courts, and zen monasteries, and animated versions at higher membership tiers. Chepeku maps work on every major virtual tabletop. You can use them for whatever RPG you want to play, and there's new maps coming out every week. So check out their Patreon through the link below. And the last thing before we start filling our map with icons, it's helpful to outline the land we'll be filling in. Most fantasy maps at this regional scale will have a mainland that covers 2 or 3 edges of the paper, a coastline, and 1 or 2 major islands, simply because this combo provides a variety of landscapes to explore. But your fantasy map could be oops all islands, totally landlocked, or anything in between. Then the first land feature we want to practice is mountains, because mountains further define the landscape itself and help us determine where to place the other features. The most simple mountain icon is this upside down V shape. If you put enough of them together, varying their size and steepness a little bit, even this very simple style looks pretty good. One trick that I've found helpful for any mountain icon is to start a mountain range from the top and work down your map or left to right. That just works for my brain better. Then try adding some detail. A third angled line in the middle gives each peak some dimension on the page, especially if you shade in that sliver, and you can always vary the shape of your mountains by adding secondary peaks, ledges, round tops, which is how you make hills by the way, snow caps, or of course, an active volcano, which looks kind of like a snow-capped mountain peak with a curve for the caldera at the top and dots, wisps, or clouds of smoke coming out. And now, with our mountains and hills in place, we have also defined the low-lying areas of our map where our main water features should go. Real quick, there's a weird misconception I've heard before that rivers always flow north to south, but I can assure you rivers flow downhill whichever cardinal direction that may be. So we just want to make sure that we have a few streams coming out of our mountains, flowing into each other as they head toward a coastline or a lake or off the edge of our map. And the most simple way to draw a river is one slightly wavy line, then a second slightly wavy line parallel to it, trying to keep the distance between them consistent, maybe widening around some bends or as a river approaches its destination. anywhere the water would be slowing down or where the land becomes low and flat. Then if your map has coastlines, I think it's cool for rivers to literally breach that coastline and become part of it, and then draw a second line, wrapping the coast, either solid or dashed, perhaps layering up some dashed lines, or even using horizontal hatches to make the coast even more distinct as a boundary. You can use similar methods for the interior edge of lakes, and then just throw in a couple classic wave tips on the water, and you're done with this part. Now we gotta stop drawing for a minute to plot out our major points of interest, like towns, by leaving some faint markings or blank space on our map. On this note, you don't need to write in names for all of these features, but if you want to, leave or make space for those as well. And when it comes to cities, they're almost always going to be along a river or a coastline, and realistically, most of the smaller settlements would be scattered right around them, but at this scale, you probably only want to include 1 to 3 cities tops, and just assume there are villages or towns nearby, so then you only draw villages or towns if they're in remote locations away from those cities. And drawing a village is really simple. I just like to use one of these little hovels, just 2 parallel vertical lines with a squat curved roof and a rounded door. Making it taller or more angular gives it the appearance of a cabin or a larger cottage in my opinion, which is also fine. And this basically is how we scale up from village to town, adding taller or even more castle-like towers. Then a proper city would be depicted as a castle's keep, combining more of those icons, while other potential points of interest, like ruined forts or towers in the wilderness, just use 1 or 2 of the elements of a castle. And at this point, we're almost ready to start just filling in space with finer details, so it's time to toss in some weirder points of interest. Caves can be curved openings in the side of mountains or hills, the entrance shaded solid or with dots or hatch marks. I drew this one really big and then started getting carried away with it. How about some strange dark obelisks in the countryside? Just little black spikes that jut up from the ground or the water. And chasms, how did I forget? Every good fantasy map needs a chasm or two. Just jagged lines like a crude lightning bolt shape with vertical lines and some shading on the interior to give it dimension. You can add things like waterfalls spouting from mountains just like a river, tiny windmills like those towers in a windmill shape, cross-hatched farmlands around towns, curved bridges over rivers, simple dotted lines work well for roads. But when it comes to those super simple, easy to draw roads, don't get carried away. I really like to keep my roads to a minimum because I think that fantasy adventurers, so assuming a role-playing game setting here, should have to decide which lands to traverse and which to avoid, and building in multiple roads on a map kind of takes away that trailblazing opportunity. And on that note of showing or not showing roads, you should always keep in mind what this map depicts and what it does not depict. Just because something is on the map doesn't mean it's there for all time, and just because something is not on the map doesn't mean it did never or could never exist. For example, in a role-playing game, a party of adventurers crossing the wilderness should be discovering new or long-forgotten sites that could not have been drawn onto their map until they mark it themselves. And next, we're into what I consider the filler icons of a map, not because they're any less interesting, but simply because they tend to fill up a lot of space around the other icons, so they kind of have to come last. Forests. They're a huge part of the kind of fantasy I enjoy, and we have a bunch of good options for realizing them on a map. Teeny mountains, teeny triangles with trunks, ovals with trunks, clouds with trunks, or a cluster of these where one front tree line is detailed, but the rest of the outline mirrors the sides and the tops of the individual tree style you chose. And if you want to be a little realistic about it, forests will always tend to be more dense on one side of your mountains than the other side, but don't stress over that kind of thing unless you're a professional cartographer, and if you're not just deciding that you can hand wave whatever you want with magic because fantasy. And then drawing grasslands involves hardly any effort at all. We're talking some dots, or little dashes, maybe even super tiny little V's, and that's it. But wetlands can be a combo of forests and grasslands, and whether or not you're a professional cartographer, know the difference between a marsh, a wet grassland, and a swamp, a wet forest, to know which kind you want for your map. And if you found this tutorial helpful in some way, be sure to give it a like because that does really help the channel, and let me know in the comments if you're interested in a video on more details on some part of this process or for dungeon maps, because I think that one would be really fun. And check out this video on your screen about how to turn this into this. I don't know if that worked with the microphone, but thank you to the Bob World Builder patrons and channel members who make all of this possible. Thank you for your support, and keep building.